Yes. There are no questions yet, Joop. So
Okay.
you can start with the second.
Okay, we will continue with block 2. And block 2 is about the weighing of the heart and the journey of the soul. Now, what is exactly the weighing of the heart? An important thought is that for every human being after death, a process of evaluation of the past life of weighing takes place during the so-called panoramic vision. See also the lecture in February on reincarnation and karma next month. A much more intensive evaluation and testing process takes place during the process of initiation. From now on in this lecture, the Egyptian Book of the Dead will be considered from the point of view of initiation. The central person in the Book of the Dead is Ani, writer at the court of Pharaoh, a symbol for man in general who wants to become one with his immortal divine core. Now we will look at the first image of the Book of the Dead. We see here Ani in front of a table with offerings, worshipping of Ra when rising in the east. Ra is in fact his own divine core, and rising indicates that a test is coming. The offerings, such as the meat, bread and fruits, are the symbol for the material part of Ani, which is put at the service of the spiritual part. The man Ani is a symbol for the dual nature of man, Ani, and at the left side his wife Tutu. Ani is the spiritual, creative element, the above personal element in his nature, and Tutu, his wife, is the material, female or reproducing element, the persona. The persona of Ani, the self-developed character, has been ennobled after many lives of preparation. And the cone on the head of Tutu is the symbol of inner light. Ani says, "Homage to you, O you who has come as Khepera, the creator of the gods. Seated on your throne, you rise up in the sky, illumining your mother Nut. Seated on your throne as a king of the gods, your mother Nut worships you with both hands stretched out in worship." Khepera is the symbol for reincarnation and for the self-produced spiritual renewal, which is coming, the inner light of man. This all suggests great expectations. It is the recognition of greater possibility in his consciousness. That is why Ani must know all kinds of gods and persons by name, and do an appeal to his most inner aspect, the inner sun Ra. The second plate. At the left side we see two hands of the goddess of the sky Nut, who stretches out upward from the Ankh symbol toward the sun. Not the outer sun, but the inner aspect of the sun to which the deepest core of man corresponds. Maybe some clarification. initiation is a cosmic process. The Ankh, or the cross of life, is the symbol of the descent of spirit into matter from the sphere of the divine. The inner sun is about the ascending from the material world to the inner spiritual sun, who has a scope of the solar system. We see the pillar over here, this pillar. That is the so-called jet symbol, the symbol of the mystical East and the symbol of Osiris. It means that enlightenment is coming. In order to realize that enlightenment, life in different spheres of the solar system must be known firstly. Furthermore, you can see Isis at the left side, the hidden mystical side of nature, Nephthys, the twin sister, and the monkeys on the top with the dog heads, the gods of the dawn, their arms raised in worship for the sun. The text says the following, intended to conclude the hymn to the rising sun: a hymn of praise to Osiris Unifer, the goodness of God, the great God and Obeide, the King of eternity, the Lord of everlastingness, who traversed millions of years in his existence. You are the oldest son of the womb of Nut. You are the King of gods and men. You have received the staff and flail of rule and the rank and dignity of the divine fathers. Then we go to the next plate. We see here Ani and Tutu entering the hall of Maat, the hall of double justice, for the weighing of the heart. Present is the council on the top of the plate of 12 gods of Osiris. The council of 12 gods, who are the council for Osiris. They are the symbol of the 12 cosmic poetic forces, and you can find them back in the 12 signs of the zodiac. The harmony of those 12 forces in the human being makes the human being a harmonious being. His heart is weighed against the feather of truth or harmony. The feather of truth, the feather of Maat, is symbol for justice, compassion, love, harmony, and truth. His heart is not his physical heart, but the purity of his consciousness, the purity of his higher thinking. His heart must be as light as an ostrich feather, in view of admission to the rest of the initiation. And we see here more in detail the weighing of the heart, and the question is, during the judgment, is his consciousness pure? For the average man, this weighing of the heart takes place at certain moments in life, when we make up the balance of things. And also after death, at the moment of the panoramic vision on the past life. Man makes up the balance himself. The initians goes through that same process self-consciously after physical death. He too weighs himself, looks back from a higher part in his consciousness. What else do we see in this vignette? We see Anubis with the jackal head, the guide during the initiation. We see left of the weighing scale Shai, the god Shai, here. The personification of Ani's destiny. We see Ani's soul, the bird with the human head. And we see the goddesses Mekhenet and Rechnenet, two goddesses related to the process of birth. Because when a man dies on the outer plane, he is born on an inner plane. We see the god Thoth here. He is the scribe of the gods, helped by the monkey on top of the weighing scale, the monkey with the dog head. And next we see here a strange character. It's called Emmet the Death Eater. If the initiant is not yet in harmony with universal laws, he fails. And then Emmet devours the heart. The symbolic meaning of this is that the higher part in man realizes that he has failed. And this may happen often to us during our life. Therefore, Ani says the following prayer. He says, "My heart, my mother, my heart, my mother, my heart whereby I came into being, may not stand up to oppose me at my judgment. May there be no opposition to me in the presence of the Cha-Cha. May there be no separation between you, my heart, and me in the presence of him who operates the balance scale." The Cha-Cha, mentioned in this text, mean the four gods who symbolize Ani's karma. We will come back to that later. Then we go to the next plate. We see here at the left side Ani, who is guided by Horus to the throne of Osiris. Horus, the human heart, symbol for the higher nature of Ani. He wears the double crown of South and North Egypt, and that means that he has control over his inner and outer nature. In the middle of this plate, we see Ani kneeling for the throne of Osiris, and behind Osiris we see Isis and Nephthys. Ani now with a white wig on his head, symbolizing that his consciousness is found pure. He sacrifices his faculties to Osiris, and the cone on his head is a symbol of the pureness of his inner spiritual faculties. In Buddhism, you might find another symbol for this. It's usually called the Usnusha. We see Osiris with the Atef crown, symbol of power and dominion. And see also the so-called scepter. Here he has the shepherd's staff and the flail. And you see 12 cobra serpents on top of his chair and Horus on top of it. Then we go to a detail here in the next plate. You see here again the lotus plant, and you see 4 images, and these are the 4 sons of Horus, or the so-called Cha-Cha. Exoteric, they are the 4 points of the compass in the universe, and they are called Mesta for the south, Hapi for the north, Tuamentev for the east, and Quebsenef for the west. Esoteric, they are called in the secret doctrine the Lipikas, the recorders of karma who are located on the four corners of the universe. They are the sons of the initiant. And they are the karmic result of the actions of the initiant. It is in fact his self-created destiny. Wherever he goes, there is always a confrontation with his karmic consequences. Therefore, Horus, the higher nature of Ani, says, I have come to you, O you Unifer, and I have brought unto you the Osiris-Ani. His heart is righteous, and it had come forth from the balance. It had not sinned against any god or goddess. Let him appear in the presence of the god Osiris, and let him be like unto the followers of Horus forever and ever. And with that, the weighing of the heart is concluded. He succeeded in letting go of the attachment to the lower part of his nature, such as his physical body. In Egyptian terms, he realized Osiris Typhon. The first part of the initiation process is finished. What remains of man during the initiation is everything except the physical body and his inner spiritual nature. The excarnate man is in a state of consciousness which is called in the Theosophia Kamaloka, or place of desire. The ancient Egyptians called it the underworld or Amenti. The average man in this state is not self-conscious, is in a dream state, and works out the energy he has built up during life with regard to ambitions and desires. The initiant is awake in the sphere and experiences these states self-consciously. The initiant will be tested. Is he really free of all the desires that characterize this sphere? Then begins the journey of the soul through Amenti. What is exactly the journey of the soul through Amenti? The journey of the soul through Amenti, the underworld, is nothing more than a change of state of consciousness that gives the impression of living in another world. A world which, although it exists, and which we eons ago experienced and co-created, is a world of consciousness. But a different plane of consciousness which the initiant has not yet entered self-consciously. The beginning of the journey of the soul through Amenti is presented as a funeral procession. We see Ani's wife, Tutu, here next to the coffin, who is crying. And complainers and servants carry attributes of Ani, symbols of his own nature, like everything he has used during his life. After all, he always brings himself with him. The next plate, and I do not go into the details of all those plates in view of time, we see again an image of the funeral procession. Then Ani goes through different tests and trials during his journey. We see here an overview of plate 7, and then we go to the top left part, a detail, and we see Ani with his wife Tutu. Ani has to face the first tests where he is playing a game called Senet. And that game of Senet symbolizes the game he is playing with his higher self, and that means it is symbol for his inner struggle. Ani has to show that he controls his lower nature. And in other traditions in the world, we see that there are similar stories. In the Bhagavad Gita, for instance, we see also Arjuna who has to struggle within himself. In the Voice of the Silence, we may read the text, "Give up your life if you want to live." And in the Bible, we can read, "Collect yourself treasures in heaven and not here on earth." We see at the left side of this plate, Ani and Tutu in the form of the Ka, in general considered as the human soul, standing in front of a sacrificial table with two lotuses. Recurring theme in the Book of the Dead is that every victory must be sacrificed, i.e., that everything that has been developed comes at the service of the totality of life. That is why there are regularly vignettes, plates, with a sacrificial ritual. We go to the next plate. Here we see two lions called Yesterday and Tomorrow. They are carrying the horizon with the sun on it, and they carry the celestial arch. Ani needs to realize that he is the result of his own past and that his future lies within it. Ani therefore says, "I am yesterday and I know tomorrow." The next plate. In the center of this plate we see a gate, and above that gate we see the right eye of Ra, also called the eye of Horus. It is the symbol for the sun, and it is related to the myth that Set, the brother of Osiris, stole the sun, and the god Thoth then defeated Set and put the sun back in its place. The meaning of it is that our inner sun deserves its rightful place so that we can enlighten life in the material world with our inner spiritual wisdom, Horus, to be able to distinguish illusion from reality. We go to the next plate. Left, we see again the four gods which are the four sons of Horus, the Cha-Cha. Right from that, we see seven other gods who are called the seven luminous ones. Ani has to recognize those gods, and he can only do so if he has developed the correspondent characteristics in himself. Madame Blavatsky describes the seven luminous ones extensively in the Secret Doctrine. They are the seven spheres in our solar system, the seven spheres of the seven sacred planets. They play an important role in the evolution of our planet, but also in the evolution and development of our human consciousness. Therefore, the seven luminous ones can be seen as the protectors of our nature and of our body, and of the body of Osiris, which is represented by the solar disk. Now we enter a new phase in Amenti. in which essential victories have to be accomplished. We see that more tests and trials are coming. First, an overview of plate 10. We will now have a look at the left upper corner. We see in these details a male cat, which is symbol for Ra, which beheads the snake Apepe. Apepe is the symbol for the enemies of Ani, aspects of his lower psychic nature. In the text it says, "The rising sun overcomes the darkness." The greatest enemies of every human being and of the initiate are the snakes which every human being has formed in his own thinking, like, for instance, prejudice. Project your own thinking onto the world and consider that as the truth and the measure of all things. Participate in gossip. Refrain from fact-checking, very important in our era. And probably you know yourself much more good examples. At the right side of this picture, we see three gods with butcher knives. Ani recognizes these three gods and says, "Free me from the guardians with the butcher's knives, who have terrible fingers and who defeat the followers of Osiris." Those followers of Osiris are people trying to rise above the illusion of the material world. In doing so, they appeal to their higher nature in such a way that their lower nature opposes it. The elements of the lower nature are thus here presented as the guardians with the butcher's knives. Compare also Buddhism. You see, during the story of the enlightenment of the Buddha, that there was a battle with the god Mara. In the Bible, you see Jesus and John the Baptist, who both went into the desert to experience the great temptation. We go to the next plate, which is about the 7 gates and the 10 pylons. Because Ani has to go to different sub-areas of Amenti, where he again and again has to show that his higher nature is constantly in charge. You see here the plate which indicates at the top row the 7 gates and below the 10 pylons. Because the Egyptians assumed that the underworld, the domain of Osiris, was divided into districts with all kinds of different spheres, and they all had a kind of castle. During his journey, Ani has to pass 7 gates and 10 so-called pylons. And for the 7 gates, he must know the names of the guardians and the corresponding spells for this gate. And for the 10 pylons, he must know the name of the guardian god. We will have a short look at this. For gate 1, Ani mentions the names of the gods and says, "I am the mighty one who created his own light." That means that he himself worked to broaden and enlighten his own consciousness. Then Ani says, "I have come to you, O Osiris, and purified from that which defiled you, I adore you." At gate 3, Ani says, I have come and I have done away the offensive thing which was upon Osiris. And the meaning of that sentence is, I have purified myself, enlightened myself, and brought spiritual impulses in this way into the world. At gate 4, Ani says, amongst others, I am the son of Osiris. I have accomplished the journey. I have advanced in Amenti. At gate 6, Ani says, I am the avenger according to law. I have avenged the injury of his eye. I have defended Osiris. I have accomplished my journey. At gate 7, Ani says, I have come to you, O Osiris, being purified from foul emissions. Then he goes to the pylons. He has to recognize and name the beings at the different pylons. Pylon 1, the Lady of Terror. Pylon 2, the Lady of Heaven. And this continues until pylon 10. Here the Book of the Dead lacks the necessary information to properly interpret Egyptian psychology. Then we go to the next plate. Ani and Tutu continue, accompanied by the Zem priest, and arrived at 2 gates. Behind them are 10 planes or spheres with different gods, such as Osiris, Isis, and Horus. Here you see those 10 columns represent these 10 spheres. If you like, they represent the 10 kingdoms of nature. Ani should recognize those 10 different spheres. After Ani has recognized those 10 spheres, he says, Hail Thoth, who made the word of Osiris true against his enemies, make sure that Osiris Ani can make the word true against his enemies. Then comes the phase in which the coming mastership as a teacher presents itself to Ani. We go to the opening of the mouth. We see first and complete plate 15, and then we go to the detail, the top left corner, which is showing Ani standing opposite the Sem priest with the leopard skin on, holding the Urheka in his hands. Urheka meaning big in words, big in influence. The initiate is given a voice, his mouth is being opened to become a teacher, an inspirator for others. Ani gets influence and power in Amenti. The next vignette in this plate, we see Ani opposite Anubis with in his right hand his heart. Here you may see it. Ani says, let my heart be with me in the house of heart, that is Amenti. He expresses the wish that he does not lose his heart in the underworld. The next detail of this plate, we see at the right side Ani with his scepter in his hand, which is the sign of power. He always allows his higher nature, his heart, to prevail and has control over his lower psychic astral nature. He has control over Amenti, the astral world. Finally, Ani says, I don't let my heart be taken away from me in Amenti. He has realized in himself Osiris-Lunus. He is master over his lower psychic astral nature. Then he goes further on. He has now power over and control in Amenti. And in the next plate, here you see an overview. Ani and Tutu breathe in this plate, the center plate here. Breathe the air off and in Amenti and drink the water in Amenti. As Ani proceeds, he has power over Amenti indeed, and he is a conqueror. In another image of this plate, we see here Ani again sitting on the left side. And he is sitting in front of a sacrificial table with the scepter in his hand. And Ani says, my hiding place is opened, my hiding place is opened. The spirits fall headlong in the darkness, but the eye of Horus has made me holy. And he continues, in very truth, I am Ra himself. And further on, I am crowned upon my throne like the king of the gods. I shall not die a second time in Amenti. Summarizing, Ani has accomplished his task unscathed. He has realized the eye of Horus, his inner Ra. He can enter and leave Amenti without having to die a second time. He has shown to master the pure aspects of his thinking. He has realized Osiris Horus in himself. Then Ani has passed the biggest dangers. Then he continues. He is going to make a successful end at his journey through Amenti. We see here plate 17, an overview, and we now go again to the left top side detail. Here we see Ani in front of three gods with their scepter and Ankh symbol in their head. And Ani says, behold, I shall come into my fields. That means he's going back to the land or the plane of origin from which he originated. And I shall cut the grain. The gods shall provide me with food, that is spiritual food. And finally, the last image of the soul through Amenti, this plate, where we see Ani and Tutu in worship for Osiris Ra plus Isis. Osiris with the crown of southern Egypt, the spiritual world symbolizing. Ani then expresses the following wish. Grant you that I may reach the heaven of eternity and the region where your favored ones dwell. May I unite with those holy and perfect spirit souls of Amenti. Ani is now ready to make the step to enter the spiritual realms, which in fact will lead to the throne of Osiris. Summarized, during the journey of the soul, the initiate is confronted in the underworld with his own past. Has he conquered the lower parts in his nature? Has his higher nature, his heart, been in charge all the time? If successful, he has realized the qualities of Osiris-Lunus, the mastery of his psychic astral nature, and the quality of Osiris-Horus, pure use of the aspects of his thinking. If successful, he can keep the connection between the spiritual world and the material world intact. And he can return as a teacher to inspire others. He is ready to go to the spiritual planes. I've tried to draw an image of this whole process, and I will complete that image in the third and last block. We see here the spiritual world, we see here the physical world, and then the astral world, the world of Amenti, and the spiritual world. The first phase of initiation was the realization of Osiris-Typhon, then the realization of Osiris-Lunus, and finally the realization of Osiris-Horus. We will continue after the break with the Osiris initiation, the initiation in the spiritual world, and we now will have a break of 3 minutes and you can draft your questions. Thank you.
Yes, there is one question. How is the antiquity of Egypt asserted as over 75,000 years old? And is there any reference in the pyramids or anywhere or in any of the ancient artifacts discovered? Or is it based on the interpretation from esoteric books of wisdom?
Well, the answer is that, in fact, both is the case. You can read in the Secret Doctrine of Madame Blavatsky that the old age of this tradition, this Osiris-Isis cult, is based, amongst others, on the fact that the so-called zodiac of Dendera, that is a zodiac made of stone, of which the original is in the Louvre in Paris. That was the ceiling of in one of the buildings of the temple of Dendera. And if you look at this zodiac, and if you know how to interpret, then you can see that this zodiac of Dendera symbolizes the positions of the constellations of the zodiac around our solar system more than 3 precessions ago. And the precession is about 26,000 years. That is a cyclic motion of the axis of our planet Earth, which is making this kind of motion. And if you know how to interpret this zodiacal signs with these Egyptian glyphs on it, then you can see that it pictures the stars more than 75,000 years back in time. And this is one of the artifacts with which you can interpret that this tradition must have been very old. So that is in short the answer. Yeah, no other questions? Okay. Thank you for the question. Then we continue with the last part, which is about the Osiris initiation. It is about the journey